Thank you very much. If you forgive me, I'm going to speak mostly from the economic side. That's my role at work, and that's my main area of focus, and on the GCC. I think, of course, compared to the wider region, the GCC economic environment is relatively far more favorable. We're not being directly impacted from an economic stance from the devastating regional developments that are happening. And so we're relatively isolated at that. I think what particularly, I've been looking at the Gulf economies now for 30 years, but I think what particularly makes me positive about this region, and of course there's significant challenges, including the energy transition, job creation for the youth population, etc. But I think what particularly makes me positive at this moment, really since the oil price collapse in 2015, is the policy focus, the strength to move forward with reforms, make difficult decisions that were earlier seen difficult to progress with. So of course, when the oil price collapsed, and we all know about the social contract where oil revenue comes to the government and then is spread throughout the economy through government spending, you started seeing now areas such as VAT being introduced, excise tax. These are still relatively small, but you continue to see the focus on governments realizing that they can't continue just being oil exporting countries, and they need to gradually diversify and morph into a new economic models coming along. So if you see sort of in 2014, budget break-even oil prices, which we see as a key indicator of the strength of the fiscal position, for most of the GCC countries, they were over 80. Saudi was over 100, Bahrain over 100, Oman over 100. And thanks to these reforms and focus on spending, many of these have come down. UAE and Bahrain, we expect the budget break-even to be below $60 a barrel. Of course, Qatar is in a very different position, and easier position, because gas comes in, and the revenue that's going to generate coming forward from that is going to be very different. So that's one side. And of course, the role of Saudi Arabia also has woken the region up, as Saudi Arabia has progressed with Vision 2030 and its diversification plan. That's also changed the narrative in the wider Gulf economies, where the focus on either staying ahead or progressing with reforms has been very, very important. So the focus on diversification. And I think the third area that really was a seismic sort of view on policymakers here, especially for small externally facing economies, was when the pandemic had happened. So you saw at that point economies shut off, key areas such as tourism, etc., totally grind to a halt. And there's that view again that, okay, for economy like UAE, where the population is 10 million, much of that expatriate, yes, you will have to be externally facing, but to increase the catchment area. So what we've seen from the UAE, for example, is we've had increasing CEPA, comprehensive economic agreements. So we've seen the sort of the catchment area of being a trading hub, a service hub, a capital hub, has moved from the Gulf to the region, to the Indian subcontinent and Africa, and now it's spreading more and more to the wider globe, and it's really being a transshipment service hub all the way from China to the Americas. So I think that is one key area of diversification. Of course, again, a small economy is easier to manage than somewhere like Saudi Arabia. You can, the population still requires large influx of expat population. It means that you can, through your economic zones, be competitive as well, while Saudi Arabia, the key challenge ultimately of Vision 2030 is to create sufficient jobs for its own domestic population. And what we've really seen is, I mean, the impressive areas which I did my PhD on Saudi in the 90s. I wouldn't have expected the social reform. The speed at which it's happened, the buy-in from the youth population, you know, these are things we would not have expected. The development of new sectors, such as tourism. But again, these are relatively low-paid jobs. And if we look at technology coming in, you know, to get it's to not only get the jobs, it's to get the employment, to get the know-how, to be competitive on these fronts. And we speak a lot to companies who go to Saudi Arabia, who come to different areas. You know, again, there's different areas such as the investment area, but, you know, a critical area going forward to create jobs will be labor productivity and cost of labor. And they're, you know, competing with places like Asia, where you've got a different education base, lower, you know, cost of labor, higher productivity. Those are going to be key challenges. And also talking about the role of the private sector, which has traditionally been the family businesses. What you've seen in Saudi Arabia is the state, including with entities like the PIF, taking up more and more of the economy. So it's also creating an environment that independent private sector can thrive. That's going to be critical going forward. Ultimately, you know, we talked about budget break-even oil prices. As foreign investment has not come into the level that Saudi has needed, you've seen the state tapping more and more areas of strength, trade easing of policies, digitalization, etc. All of these areas. FDI to GDP was 6%. FDI in the UAE, Greenfield, was second only to the US in absolute terms. So this is a place where private sector can thrive alongside the state-owned entities that are key drivers. In the case of Saudi Arabia, even though we've seen it increase, it's still 2.5% of GDP. Oman also has seen FDI much higher as a percentage of GDP. So, you know, you can see those challenges going forward as more and more youth population enter the labor market. And I think the biggest challenge is providing the deliverable on the labor front to keep the youth population happy. On the energy transition side, if you speak to different members of the GCC, you know, UAE feels that the transition will come sooner, 2030. Saudi Arabia think it will be later. Yes, I think a lot of the GCC countries will be the last man standing on the oil front, the cost of extraction, the cost of production. But the rent coming from these areas will keep coming down as the population grows. And the ability to replace that with areas such as hydrogen, especially as, you know, we are seeing even in China, huge investment in renewable energy. We are already seeing discussions that Chinese oil imports might peak this year, coming forward from 2030. So we're seeing how quickly this is happening. So I think, again, the ability to invest is different. UAE, which is further on its investment, whether it's on infrastructure, tourism, you're seeing more resources coming into that. Abu Dhabi, 40% of energy generation comes from clean and nuclear energy. And, you know, Oman is doing a lot on green hydrogen and gas as well. Qatar also gas capture. But I think in the case of Saudi Arabia, to meet its own energy demands and to be able to export green energy and to have the rent to support the population, that is going to be a key challenge as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Malik. I love the input. Thank you.